Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Mike Russo, Anthony LaPanta come to you from the Bally Sports North studio, where Anthony just finished Twins Live. The Mets hosting the Twins tonight. Coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Big news of the day, Anthony. We have a live show. That's the biggest news of the day. There's nothing else bigger going on. August 14th is our next live show at Split Rocks. We've been on hiatus this summer. Truth be told, we were supposed to do one in June, but I wasn't in town the entire month because of the Stanley Cup Final deciding to go 7 games. Actually, we did do one in June. You did one with Gorgie. But if I'm not there, did it exist? Right.
We did a live show. Yeah. You didn't do a live show.
That's a good point. All right. So there was a live show. I haven't done one since like April. So August 14th, 7 p.m. Split Rocks is our next live show. And then once the season starts, we'll get back on a regular rotation of live shows between Tuttle's L-Season and Split Rocks. Thanks to Tim Tuttle and his family for making those happen. Anthony, big news of the day. Brock Faber. 8-year, $68 million deal, $8.5 million AAV that starts in the 25-26 season. And this just proves that a deal can get done even if it's not close, if you just sit down with the fellow agents on the other side and just decide, with motivation that you want to hammer it out. And here's a good example of it. All summer long, they met for the first time at the draft. The Wild really didn't budge off their $8.25 million offer, which is what my sources say. And they wouldn't budge off their well over $9 million deal. And these agents, Steve Bartlett with his sons Brian and Scott, who really run the show with Brock Faber, they had plenty of reason. They saw where the deals were going with guys like Owen Power, Jake Sanderson. They represent Cale Makar, whose deal will be wrapping up in the $9 million range in the upcoming seasons. And Charlie McAvoy got 9.5. So, but the other thing is that you have the last extension was a $9 million AAV with Kirill Kaprizov, and they felt that was even a negotiating comparable, and so it didn't have to necessarily be defensemen. But they hammered it out last night. His agents are in town for hockey camp that they run, and with their guys that are Twin Cities based, and they met out in a ballroom at the Graduate. Bill Guerin with Steve Bartlett, Scott Bartlett, and Brian Bartlett. They sat down and boom, the deal was done. Wild gave a little, Faber gave a little, and here they are, 8-year, $8.5 million deal. As usual with Wild players, no signing bonus. That is a Wild staple. But at year 5 of the deal, which is when he's first eligible for no move protection or no trade protection, that's your UFA years. The Wild buyout 5, 6, 7, and 8. So years 5, 6, 7, 8, 4 years of UFA. He gets a no move, but a 15-team no trade, which would allow the Wild at that point, if there's expansion, Anthony, it'd be probably 18 teams that they could trade him to if something went awry here. But a really good deal, $8.5 million with the cap only going up and up and up in those 8 years to get him on what they believe will be a steal.
I think it's a good contract for the team, without a doubt. And I don't study a lot about what other guys and what comparable guys make. But when you and I first talked about it, and the first number that popped into my head was 8 times 8. And I thought if the Wild could get him at that deal, it would be a great contract. I know you had been throwing out numbers that it was over 9. And to me, that would have been a little high for a guy that has played one full season in the NHL. But I think this is a good deal. And it goes back to what Chuck Fletcher was the first one who said it to me this way, but I've since had other guys. If both sides want to get a deal done, a deal can get done. And it doesn't take long. And this was clear. Both sides wanted to get this done. Faber didn't want to go anywhere. The Wild didn't want to let him go anywhere. I think this is a good deal for both sides. And Faber, 1 year into an NHL career, is now set for life.
And a really good message that they showed on wild.com today of Bill Guerin and Brock Faber signing the contract on the dotted line with Brock's parents, Carrie and Jay, to his sides. But Billy told him right there, just be who you're going to be. That a lot of NHL players, and Billy knows from experience from playing in this league a long time, that they try to, once they sign that home run contract, they try to be somebody they're not. And what he's saying is, we're signing you because of the player that you are. and don't feel like all of a sudden you have to play like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Just continue to be a shutdown defenseman, and they'll try to work the team around them. And so I think that's a really good message. And what a cool story, Anthony. Again, traded in the Kevin Fiala deal, but this is a kid that grew up in Maple Grove, grew up a huge Wild fan, puts out a picture on his social media today of him as a young kid with his dad, and he's got the old school red Christmas jersey, Minnesota Wild jersey on. A couple years ago when Kaprizov hit the 40 goal mark, I think it was that big game where he hit the 40 goal mark. Faber just happens to be on the ice where he celebrates. And now he's teammates with him, but just the hometown kid signing the biggest contract extension in Wild history at $68 million. And now starting in 25-26 will be the highest paid Wild defenseman in team history, $8.5 million, overtakes Captain Jared Spurgeon, who was $7.57 million. And remember, that was a Bill Guerin extension where he gave him like $25,000 more than the AAV of Ryan Suter and Zach Parise to make him the highest paid defenseman in Wild history per year. Now Brock breaks both those records.
Well, I think what's amazing about Faber, and I was playing golf with Wes Walls this weekend, and he made the comment because we were asked about Zeev Boyum, and we were just projecting and guessing when he might land in the NHL. And Wes just finally turned. He said, fans in Minnesota will forever be tainted by what a defenseman looks like coming out of college because of what we just watched with Brock Faber. And he said, this just doesn't happen. Guys are not that ready for the NHL at that point in their life that fast. And he said, people are going to have to dial back expectations of everybody else. And that's just such a testament to Faber. Position. And it's just such a testament to Faber, how physically ready, how mentally ready, how he's the perfect combination of confidence and humility, where he's still, every time you talk to him and you listen to him talk, he sounds like a guy that isn't sure if he's going to, he knows he's going to make the team, but he sounds like a guy who's taking nothing for granted.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't just assume I'm going to be on the first defensive pair, I'm going to play 25 minutes a night.
Yeah.
He still sounds like a guy that doesn't even really consider himself an NHL star.
Well, to your point, Bill Guerin made a joke during the presser that now you could go buy that cabin you've always wanted. He goes, my grandparents have a cabin and I love going there. I'm just going to continue to go there. I mean, that's just who he is. Now, everybody changes. Jake Middleton used to only wear white and black T-shirts. Now he's pretty freaking well-dressed man. So, people change as they continue to.
They do, but I think that's why this was such a, you know what?
Obviously, I'm being tongue-in-cheek,
right,
but you know what I mean.
You know what I thought was interesting is, I was just looking at some of the other extensions, and a couple were just signed in Columbus. And they've got young players who are actually further along in their career in terms of experience than Faber is, and yet they're signing them to the short-term bridge-type deals because they're not sure what they have yet. I think the Wild know exactly what they have in Faber, and that's not to say that he's already peaked and that this is what he's going to be, but they know what they have in terms of the person. This isn't going to be a guy whose life and game changes because he now has a big contract. And I say that sounding certain. For obviously nothing is 100% for certain, but there is zero doubt in my mind that this guy, it's like Joel Eriksson-Ek. You knew his game wasn't going to change when he signed a big contract.
Right.
This guy's game isn't going to change because of his personality.
Yep. And I think the only thing is that, what he really wants to continue to get better and evolve as a defenseman. There are areas of his game that he's going to have to continue to shore up and be coached on. And maybe that'll happen now that Jack Capuano is coming and you have somebody that's been in the league for a long, long time and coached a lot of, big quality defensemen and things like that. He's going to have to get better on the penalty kill. That was an area that was blemished last year. And the one thing that's going to be interesting to see if it continues to evolve or at least maintain, Anthony, is that he's never provided offense like he did last year. Nobody knew that he had that offensive capability. I remember talking to Bob Motzko when he signed with the Wild, and he's the only one that guaranteed to me almost in my initial story that he will continue to evolve offensively. And still, I think a lot of people doubted it because it just never, he wasn't a power play guy in college. And even, his numbers in the lower levels weren't, elite. And so, will that continue to come for him? Especially next year. One reason why he got on the power play last year at all was because Jared Spurgeon was hurt. So will he be the number one power play guy next year? Or will they even maybe use Chisholm, who they used at times on the number one power power play. So we'll see what John Hines has in mind for the short term. I think what's really good is that if you look at Brock Faber's season last year, when he was not with Jonas Brodin, his numbers were extremely pedestrian, if not worse. Now you have Jared Spurgeon back, which means Jake Middleton will get on that pair, hopefully stabilize Middleton, who had a tough go last year. And now it looks like, as long as they're all healthy, and we know at times Jonas Brodin, he doesn't get through 82-game seasons, but if Brodin can play with Faber, I think that really makes a formidable pair where, he could continue to be an offensive guy because we know Jonas is sort of the safe guy. But that line that pair is a shutdown pair, Anthony, on the short term next year. If those 4 defensemen are healthy, the Wild's top 2 are going to be really good next season.
Really good. And then let's not forget what the third pair looks like with Zach Bogosian. I think Zach Bogosian last year might have been Faber probably would have to be the biggest surprise just because he had played 8 NHL games. Mm-hmm. But I think other than that, Zach Bogosian might have been the biggest surprise for the Wild last year. I thought when acquired, I just had no idea how well he could still move, how well he could skate. Yeah. Subtle little skills that he had. I think if Zach Bogosian's on your third set, you've got something. Especially
from a leadership standpoint. But to your point, Bogosian, people forget, was a top draft pick. He was
third
top,
overall.
Exactly, as for a reason. And so while everybody looks at him everybody looks at him as a rugged guy, he's been on waivers, was scratched in Tampa, and everybody looked at him. And the one thing that was shocking to me especially because he lives here and we see him in the Beauty League and things like that, is the number of fans that when he was traded here thought he couldn't skate. And that's always been one of his best assets. Now, maybe it's because he skates kind of awkwardly, that bent down motion that people think he can't skate. Like all big rugged defensemen that's had a bunch of injuries, going backwards at times, you're going to be victimized. But he's a quality defenseman. And then we know that Chisholm can skate. So suddenly, you have 6 really good skating defensemen because Middleton's a mover as well.
And I think he brings a little bit of that on himself just with the beard and everything. It makes him look like a lumberjack. And if it mattered to him what people thought, and all of a sudden, I think that just makes him look like more of a big lumbering defenseman than he really is. And yes, he's a physical presence, and he's an intimidating at times physical presence on the blue line, but he's a lot more than that. I think the way the Wild blue line shakes up right now, all of it depends on health. But with those guys in the top 4 you talked about, that's the strength of this club. It always has been. They've always been built on a defensive core that was committed to defend, that could skate, was mobile, that could move the puck. And I think that's what they've got built right now. And I don't know, maybe you're a year away from seeing Zia Boyum be a part of that group as well, that you could be talking about the backbone of a club for the next few years.
Yeah. And, and
let's not get too far ahead of ourselves with whether or not he's going to be here. This is all about Brock Faber tonight. But I just think that with Faber, you've got as good an idea what you have as you could possibly have after watching a guy play one full season.
Perfect segue, because that's the one thing I wanted to get to next is all the sort of the naysayers out there, or critics saying, why didn't they wait? Why didn't they wait? This to me is not like the Marcus Foligno, Ryan Hartman, Jake Middleton debate that we've had in the past. Why do it ahead of time? This is a 21-year-old defenseman, and that, to your point, they think they know what they have. And the way that the blue line contracts are going right now, if he does have another monster year, the Bartlett camp would absolutely have the wherewithal to go to the Wild. No, he's a $9.5, $10 million defenseman now. Look at the contracts, the way that 21-year-olds have been signing here the last couple of years. And anybody that has watched Brock Faber play seemed to always first compare him to Charlie McAvoy. Well, McAvoy's a $9.5 million player on his extension. So I think it made all the sense to get this done now. That doesn't take back to maybe some of the criticism and debates that we've had before. Not me, not you, but on Middleton, like, why not wait? Is he really going to get more than 4.3 next summer if he has a good year? I still don't think so. But to me, Faber was just a no-brainer to get done now. There was no rush to get it done, but I think to get it done now makes a lot of sense because they don't think he's getting any cheaper. They think they know what they have. And with the cap going up and up and up, $8.5 million could be a steal in a couple of years.
Well, think about what the alternative would have been. 2 years down the road, I think I'm not an expert in this way, but let's just say 2 years down the road, he's a $10 million player. 8 times 10 as opposed to 8 times 8.5. That's a big difference.
Absolutely.
And what would the next couple of years have looked like? It's not like you get him for nothing. The next 2 years, you still would have had to pay him a pretty good chunk. And I think it's a no-brainer to get the deal done. Billy has always been a guy that once he knows what he has and once he knows what he wants, let's lock it in, and has been a cost certainty guy. And this is another example of that.
Now what it does do is put into crystal clear, crystal clear knowledge now of what next year will look like. Because the one thing we've sort of been guessing is that if it's 8.5, 9, that their flexibility and available cap space next summer would be a lot less. Now we actually see that number written in pen as opposed to what we were guessing. And it just shows, again, that the Wild are not going to have a ton of cap space once the Parisian Suitor, the big pan of that, the 14.7 comes off the books, especially in light of the fact that we know that the Wild are going to have to attempt to throw a large Brinks truck at Kirill Kaprizov to extend him.
That's true, but it's a good problem to have because you had no idea that you were going to wind up with an $8 million top pair defenseman in Brock Faber.
Right.
When you were looking ahead and your plan originally was, here's where we'll be when that cap space is freed up. You didn't know that you were going to have this guy in the fold. And now you do. And he's worth every penny of that 8 years, $8.5 million. So it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem that now once you re-sign, now it just becomes all about the prospects that you already have in your system. Now Height, Ogren, Urov have to be legit NHL guys because of the fact that you don't have the $8 million that you could have gone out to spend on a right wing because you just spent it on a defenseman.
Right. Another perfect segue to let's take a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about Dean Evason. But the one thing that you just brought up is something that I think the Wild are continuing to look at, and that is going out and figuring out to get a short-term stopgap for a couple years. That's a really quality player, and that is Patrik Laine. We'll be right back. Summer temps may be heating up, but at Aquarius, that just means it's a summer meltdown. And what's melting away, you ask? How about all your worries about your home's water? Whether it's city or well water, say goodbye to white scale buildup, rust stains, and contaminants like those PFAs, forever chemicals. No more funny tastes or smells, just worry-free water with a Kinetico water treatment system. Kinetico uses zero electricity and minimal salt, giving you purified drinking water right from your faucet. I've had it in my house. It's absolutely incredible. And guess what else is melting away? The price. Now through July, enjoy $500 off their new whole home Kinetico water treatment system. The Aquarius and Kinetico summer meltdown of savings all starts with a free water analysis. So make sure you get that scheduled today at AquariusHomeservices.com. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius believes in earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
Get a great return on your investment with a Royal Credit Union certificate. Choose a 5.05% annual percentage yield 13-month certificate or a 4.75% annual percentage yield 18-month certificate. Royal certificates have no minimum opening balance and a locked-in rate for guaranteed earnings. Open a certificate at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings in principal. APY accurate as of 7/16/24. Insured by NCUA.
Back here, worst seats in the house. Michael Russo and Anthony LaPanta coming to you from the bottom of the fourth inning. Mets just hit a solo homer to tie the game against the Twins. Runners on second and third. My brother's team, who's coming to town in a couple of weeks, and my nephews, I should say, since
I thought you were a Mets fan.
No, I really was an Expo fan growing up. Huge
that's
Expos
right.
fan.
Islanders and Expos.
But I used to go to tons of Mets games. But coincidentally, I will be seeing the Mets in a couple of weeks. I think a couple times in Colorado. I'm actually going there for a little vacation. And the Mets are playing at Coors Field, so I'll be heading over there. All right, let's talk first about Dean Evason. It's something that you and I talked about in the last podcast when we were in Portugal, which seems like ages ago, by the way. And that was that we felt like he was, we knew that he was reportedly one of the final two in Columbus, but between those two, we've like, how do you not take Dean? And they took Dean. And, an up and coming team with guys like Murashenko that just re-signed, Kent Johnson. They're trying to sign Cole Sillinger now. They've got a lot of quality young guys there. They obviously signed Sean Monahan to the big deal this offseason. They've got Johnny Hockey. Wild fans want them to get Freddy Hockey, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But I know that you are really tight with Dean just from your golfing days together over at Royal Oak and Loggers and all the other fancy places that you guys golf. But you got to be really places. But you got to be really happy for Dean.
Incredibly happy for him and well deserved. I thought he made some good decisions along the way because it would have been really easy, and panic might be a strong word, but to all of a sudden feel like as some of these head coaching jobs were getting filled and you weren't the guy, to take one of the associate head coach jobs that he had been offered along the way. And instead, he was confident enough in his own ability to say, not this year. I want to be a head coach. Yep. And this was really the last one that was available was Columbus. And I think he's a great fit in Columbus. He's an intense guy, a no-nonsense guy, seems to deal well with young players. And they do have some young talent there. You mentioned some of them. And also throwing Adam Fantilli into that bunch.
Yeah,
and
I forgot him.
I mean, this is a team that is headed in the right direction. Columbus has turned into a sneaky good hockey town. The arena's full almost every night. It's a cool little area.
Not even turned into. It's always been. It really from day one they have supported that team, considering they've had no playoff success.
No reason to.
Like you think you have it bad in Minnesota? How about their expansion cousins?
Right, and I think I remember a couple of the times we went there early, and the arena was always more full than I thought it would be for a team in a non-conventional hockey market that wasn't very good. But the last couple of years when we've been there, it's been packed. And we were even there on a weeknight last year, and I thought, why is this place full like this? And they're into it. I know.
By the way, I'll tell you right now, the biggest genius move that they've made since I've started covering this league is hiring Marty Mulford. My good buddy from childhood is their head of tickets, and he's absolutely. I mean, in all seriousness, he's a freaking ticket genius. I mean, he is outstanding.
Well, I always we don't have to go too far down this road, but I thought it was really interesting when he made the decision to leave from Nashville to go there. I remember we went and met him in Columbus the first time we were there, and he said, well, there was nowhere to go in Nashville. We had sold everything. The arena was full. I wanted to come here where it wasn't full yet and get it there. And now it is. Yeah. And, I'm sure he's no small part of that. But I also just think the market has developed to where I think people are a little more knowledgeable. Remember some of those early years, what they'd have to announce over they had to announce when it was offside over the public address because people didn't know what the hell happened, why the whistle blew. So I think that's great. I think it'll be great for Dean. I'm excited for him. I have such respect for him as a guy and as a hockey coach that I knew that it wouldn't be long before he'd be a head guy. I was a little bit surprised that he hadn't been offered one of the other jobs. So we'll see. It'll be, and as we talked last week, the Wild are going to see him twice in the first 5 games of the season, which is, it's just funny how that stuff tends to work out. I love Dean's quote too.
Loved it.
Dean is the guy who will say things that everybody knows every coach is thinking, but he's the one guy willing to say it. And that was that anybody who tells you that it doesn't matter more to a coach to go back and coach against the team that fired him is lying. Yeah. And he said it with some more colorful language than that, but that's Dean. And
remember I sat down with him first after he was fired here. We went to Keys Cafe in St. Paul and we sat down and he could not have been more were honest in that story. And he said, remember that I think the headline was, all I know is I can effing coach, and I refuse to let being fired from this one job here tell me otherwise. And, he realizes, look, we've talked about this 1,000 times. These, look, they are handsomely paid. Okay. I get it. But it's the weirdest profession in all of the world, because you know that in all the pro sports, there's just going to be this incredible day when you're hired and you sit in front of the backdrop and you hold up the jersey with your name, Evason, on it, and you put the ball cap on, and everybody's just excited, and here's our future. We're going to go win cups, but you're getting fired 3 or 4 years from now, and it's going to be the worst day, and you're going to be miserable and all that stuff. It's just the weirdest profession in the world. But he said, and because of that, he knows he was not going to let this bad experience of being fired in Minnesota, where the team just at that point just needed some sort of kick in the butt to have a change, define him as a coach or tell him otherwise that he couldn't coach. And to your point, he turned down 2 that we know of jobs to be assistant coach / associate coach in markets that it didn't give him the head job, by the way. And he said, no, I'm going to wait. Whether he didn't know if Columbus was going to open up at that point, but because obviously Don Waddell came and then eventually fires Pascal Vincent. But he's like, I'll wait until I'm first out of the gate next year. And he'd never let the disappointment of not getting one of those jobs really define him. And he's also going to a team that has a great GM. Don Waddell is bold. There's few more bold GMs in the league. He will go out there and try to make big moves to make this team a winner.
Yeah, and I think there are a few other reasons why the profession is strange. And you hit on a couple of the big ones. And just look at the turnover in the last 14 months. Half the league has new head coaches.
Crazy.
It is, because when you come in, it takes a while to put your stamp on a team. Mm-hmm. And part of it is having time to implement your systems, your style of play, all of that kind of thing, but also the way the team is built. A general manager, to some degree, has to build the roster to fit the way the coach is going to ask guys to play. And that process usually takes more than 2 years. So that part of it's awkward. You step into a room where number one, almost everybody in that room is making more money than you. Mm-hmm. And half of them know that they're going to be there longer than you because they've got 7-8 year contracts. And unless you win a cup, there's nobody that's sticking in the same market.
Heck, even if you win a
7
cup,
or 8 years.
Craig DeBerube. You could go down the line unless you're John Cooper.
And those are just so few and far between now. Yeah. And so you're walking in. Yes, you have the hammer as the head coach of ice time and lineup spots and all those kind of things, but every one of those guys knows that if there's a major rift between you and the guys inside that room, that you're the guy that's going to go. They're not going to trade 7 guys because they don't get along with the coach. So it's a strange dynamic. Yeah. The first thing you said though is they all know what they're getting into when they take the job. They're handsomely paid. It's a terrific job, but it is a painful job because it isn't just the guy. It's the family that has to read the articles about how the coach has lost the team and the coach is going to get fired and then listen as the next guy comes in and all of a sudden there's a spark and a team wins 3 in a row. And why did they wait so long? Why didn't they fire this guy sooner? And everybody just has to bite their tongue knowing that, look, we all knew this was going to happen when we took the job. Now we all got to up and move, buy different color stuff because now we're wearing blue and red instead of the Christmas colors in Minnesota. So it's just different.
It is, I don't know. It is hilarious to me. And what you said before too about how honest Dean is and how that really is just, what makes him so charming is that he just says things that are true. Again, something else that all coaches that are fired think of but would never say publicly, except for Dean, is remember game 1 when John Hines takes over, Boldy scores, Gaudreau scores his first goal of the year. They are perfect on the PK. And so what does Dean Evason do? He texts Bob Woods and say, go figure. Like, again, that's something that no coach would ever say publicly, but he said it to me in our sit down on the record. And it's just, and that's just the human emotion of it. You're looking at it. I mean, the other thing he said in that is like, I'm not going to lie. I'm rooting against the Wild now. I don't want to see them do well.
He was rooting for the players, but against the team.
Yeah.
And that's because he went to war with those players. He believed in all of them, loved them. And
but the team fired him.
But the team
Who
fired him.
says that?
I know.
But we all know they all think it.
Absolutely.
But he says it.
Right. And I thought the couple of the ways that players responded were interesting. And Freddy Gaudreau was at the top of the list, where I remember him texting Dean saying, I need to talk to you. I owe you one. And Dean just saying, nope, you're good. Go be you. But that, and as
I'm impressed you read my article, by the way.
Well, Dean might have told me that story too, but it just was, I think I did read that article actually, now that I think about it. I got to figure this out. You know what? I got issues with The Athletic, by the way, because if I now click on a Twitter hyperlink to a story, it never lets me read the whole story. It only lets me read the first paragraph. And
so
then
you're probably like logged off or something.
I have no idea, but I logged back in, and then every time it's a vicious circle. It just keeps going through it. Yep.
All right.
So I've got issues with The Athletic.
This is not this. By the way, I turned away from the TV. It's now 4-1 with bases loaded.
It's getting away from.
Are there any outs?
Nobody outs. It's getting away from Simeon Woods Richardson tonight, who's been really good for the Twins, by the way. We talked about it in the pregame show tonight. His numbers among all Twins rookie starters in history since 1961 that have made at least 15 starts, there were only 4 who had a better ERA than he did coming into tonight. And some of the all-time great names in Twins history were among the top 9. Guys like Francisco Liriano, Scott Erickson, Bert Blylev, and Dave Goltz. These are the guys that's the company he's been in. And tonight he's getting knocked around a little bit here in the 4th inning. But last time out, he's 6 shutout innings against the Phillies, one of the best offenses in baseball. He's a confident young man and going to be a good pitcher for this team for a few years.
8 years, $68 million extension he should get.
Probably not quite.
Okay. Let's talk about Patrik Laine. A lot of questions from Wild fans because I reported in June that they were interested in him. Is there still a way? The one thing I can tell you is that I believe that Bill Guerin is going to at least reach out to Patrik Laine. So he has been cleared from the player assistance program. That now allows teams to at least talk to him directly. The way I understand is Don Waddell in Columbus has given teams permission to do that. I don't believe the Wild are one of those teams yet. If that process has even started, we might know more in the next couple of days if that process has started. But it would make sense that Bill Guerin would at least have a conversation with him. Does that mean anything? No, because the reality is that the Wild have almost no cap space going into next year right now, basically a little more than a league minimum player. Even if they were willing to eat half the contract, the Wild just don't have enough money to make it work. Even trading Gaudreau there would not just make it work. And there would need to be more. Now, a lot of people have asked me about Philip Gustafson going there. Now, the only way that to me could happen is if they trade Elvis Merzlikins, which I think that Don Waddell wants to do. But Elvis has 3 years left on his deal with a cap hit of $5.4 million. So again, Gus and him don't even out. Obviously, Laine makes a lot of money, well more than even at half price than Gaudreau. I just don't even know. I can't even fathom how the Wild would financially make it work. But I can tell you, the Wild have genuine interest in him. But that right now means very little.
I just don't see how it works unless and I don't even know how it could happen. I think if it's $1 million flyer, take it. But there's no way that math works, at least at this point. And who knows what happens in the future. But he's an intriguing player just because of his talent level and skill set. But I don't see how.
Like his cap hit for the next 2 years, $8.7 million. Even if you could somehow get Columbus to take half of that at $4.35, they can't afford it.
No.
And so the reason why I just think it's a long shot.
And even if you involve another team, you're still not.
Yeah, and that's the only way is that you're going to have to get multiple teams involved. And my gut says that there's so many teams that can take that on. That Columbus, even if it was for a lesser deal, is going to be so motivated to get out of that contract that if you can get an Anaheim or a team that has a lot of cap space to take the full freight, then I just think that obviously Columbus is going to go there. So I just still think it's very unlikely at this point, but we'll see. I do think the Wild have it. Now let's go to Gaudreau. He's got 4 years left at what is it, 2-1, Anthony? I think it's
2-1.
2-1. There were tons of questions that day. It's obviously become a joke, trade Dean over there to Columbus trade Freddie over there to Columbus because Dean's there. If the Wild really want to get out of the deal, that's obviously to me a first phone call. And maybe they have been looking for middle six guys. Maybe Dean has the ability to convince Columbus to do that, convince Don Waddell to do it. It's not a big contract. Obviously, even if for some reason Columbus is listed on Freddie's no trade list, he would waive, I would assume, to go there, to be reunited with Dean. I do think that's actually something that if the Wild wanted, it is, because look, even though the Wild do like Freddy Gaudreau and believe that he's going to have a huge bounce back year, that's $2.1 million on a guy on a 4-year deal. It just frees up not just the cap space, it just frees up a spot. And now it just makes things a little easier for eventually in the future, the Riley Heights, the Hunter Hates, the Danilo Yurovs, even just Ogren and Huznadinov, and a lot of those guys, the Canadian bankers, even somebody that, Michael Milne, I don't know, anybody that's down in Iowa or one of the prospects. I do think that that's, again, just totally without doing any due diligence to see if there's interest level from Columbus or if Billy would even be motivated to do it. I just think it makes all the sense in the world to at least make that pitch and see if it's something you can get done by the end of the summer.
Yeah, and there's so many conversations like that happen that yes, a trade might happen in an hour worth of text exchange back and forth, but usually the groundwork has been laid during a conversation long ago. And I got to believe that if that conversation hasn't already happened, that it will at some point. Just gauging interest. This guy has a great rapport with Dean. I know Dean loves him. Just if you guys are ever in the market for this type of player, give us a call. That at least has happened.
Right.
Or will happen.
I agree with you. All right. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back for the final segment of Worst Seats in the House.
Hey, everyone. Attorney Jerry Bosch here with Bosch Law Firm and WorkCompExperts.com. For almost 30 years, we've represented Minnesotans just like you all over the great state of Minnesota to guarantee they've been treated fairly and with respect when they've suffered a work-related injury. A work injury can change your life in an instant. You need someone on your side who can help you focus on getting back on your feet and getting paid while you do. You may be entitled to medical benefits, wage loss benefits, job placement, retraining, and payment for permanent disability. To make sure you are being paid all the work comp benefits you're entitled to, please call the attorneys at Bosch Law Firm. The call is always free, and there's never a fee unless we recover benefits on your behalf. Call 651-333-8300, Bosch Law Firm, or visit us at WorkCompExperts.com.
Anthony, tell us about Feller's Ranch.
Well, I'm excited. As we've talked over the last couple of weeks, Feller's Ranch has joined our show as one of our newest sponsors. I'm thrilled about that because of the quality of their steaks is second to none. They're the best steaks I've had. We had Vinny on. He talked about the spinalis cuts that we had tried. We've had their Denver cuts, which are unbelievable. Their ribeyes are terrific. We just had those at Ariana's graduation weekend. But right now, they just have announced that you'll be able to get their brisket at a place down in the southwestern suburbs, Northern Fire Barbecue. It's a cool spot. They've got an unbelievable selection of spices. And I know that the Fellers guys are really excited to have their Wagyu brisket available there. So if you're interested in brisket, you can check it out there. But as always, if you want their steaks delivered directly to your house, just go to fellersranch.com. Their vans are in the cities every week. They'll get it right to your front door. It couldn't be much easier, and you will not be disappointed in their cuts of steak.
Spring has arrived at Twill, and we are preparing for summer as well. And I got to tell you, not only is it a great place to buy graduation gifts for the man in your life, stuff for yourself, it's also a great place. I'm traveling a lot right now covering the Timberwolves. I'm on the road. I'm packing things into a tight suitcase. And what I really notice about the quality of the stuff I get at Twill is that it doesn't wrinkle. It comes out of the suitcase looking good. I tell you what I'm wearing a lot right now, the Brax pants, Johnny O shirts, Peter Millar shirts. They're just made well. So I highly recommend going to Twill in the United Galleria. Also, sign up for their email alerts at twillmn.com. They will not spam you. They just want you to know when they're going to have a specific event. A lot of the stuff I bought from Twill, I bought at like a buy 2 or buy 3 and get 1 free thing. I have all the dress shirts I need the rest of my life. I bought one time at a Stenstrom's event. So I highly recommend it. Twill in the Dining Galleria. Tell Scott Dayton we sent you, and check out twillmn.com.
Back here, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, Valley Sports North. What are you up to, Anthony?
Well, up to just watching as the Mets just batted 10 and scored 6 in the 4th inning. So knowing that Twins Live's post-game edition tonight might take a different turn than what we were originally hoping. But you mentioned our next live show, and we're
September 14th, August 14th, 7 p.m., Split Rocks.
And we're going to have the Fellers Ranch guys are going to be there to give away some steaks.
Nice.
So they're going to, I think it's a gift certificate, a couple ribeyes, and a couple fillets or something.
Wow.
I know there's at least 3 giveaways. They'll be there. So if you're a steak person, come out and listen, because I'm sure they'd be willing to. They love talking about their steaks. So pick their brains, ask them about them. I know I've talked about them a few times, but a lot of what I've learned has been from them. So if you have questions about how they're raised or how they're anything in the process from the time that they begin to the time that you put the steaks on your grill, they'll be there, and I'm sure be more than willing to answer your questions. And plus, they're going to give away a few sets of steaks. So it's a motivation in and of itself to come on out that night.
Yeah, and I think part of the deal is that you go to whoever wins house and grill for them.
That's possible. We've done that before. I actually, on our trip home,
Depends who wins it.
it depends on who wins, right? Yeah. We do have some standards, but we were talking a little bit about one of the great things we had the previous year was we had the dinner with some of our guests from our trip, and we were talking about it going into that podcast that we were going to do a drawing again, and we totally forgot about it. So we'll maybe have to revisit that later. I've loved I've donated to charity a number of times a dinner at somebody's house. Used to do it for the Wild Foundation, for the Children's Hospital fundraiser that they would do, the Wild About Children deal each year. And we had some great times. We'd go to somebody's house, cook dinner for 6 or 8 people, and a bunch of wine, great food, and really enjoyed it. I love being able to give that back. We did the night at Baltimore where I went into their kitchen and cooked dinner for a group that night and gave some money to the Wild Foundation. It's a passion of mine, but we sure have a lot of fun with it in those kind of
you know
settings.
what popped up the other day? A friend of mine Googled my name, and one of the first things that popped up was the dinner that me, and Chad did at your house that ran on Valley Sports North, where we had the round table.
Right.
That was a genius Anthony LaPanta idea.
Yep. And if I remember right,
at your island.
We tried to have you help us chopping, and that didn't last very long, didn't go very well. But I
would have needed one of those, like where you put the glove over the cut.
Right.
So
we've had a couple good dinners lately where we've had the kids together, which is always my favorite part of our dinners. The food's great, but when you bring them all together and they're prepping in the kitchen together, and we just had all of them home over the 4th of July, and then we had 3 of the 4 home last weekend. And whenever you do that, it's just such a special time. But it's kind of interesting because as you incorporate now there are significant others in these things, it's funny how, like, we assigned Ariana's boyfriend Landon to peel a carrot, and that was it's been a month worth of laughs from the rest of our family.
He doesn't know how to peel a carrot.
He couldn't quite figure it out. So I don't think Landon's a regular listener to our show, but he'll probably get a little grief now because his name was mentioned on our podcast. But yeah, it was painful to watch.
Didn't we announce once that Ariana dumped her old boyfriend?
I think that was Gianni. Oh no, it was Ariana.
Yeah,
that's right.
Luckily, he didn't listen either.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know that we announced that she had dumped him. I think we announced that she had a new boyfriend, and we were worried because the old boyfriend might have heard it. Yeah, that probably wasn't great either. Yeah. So Ariana, I apologize if you
Luckily,
get yourself
she doesn't
in hot
listen
water.
Either.
She doesn't, but she has some friends who do. So I'll have to make. Yeah.
This could be one of the first. So our producer Davida this could be one of our first where we text him to cut something out.
Yeah, no, we don't need to cut it out.
Right,
Ariana's got thick skin.
Yeah, exactly. Did you see today that I had a text your lovely wife to put on the calendar that Split Rocks was going on, because I knew there was no way that you had, and I was just already worried that you were gonna like.
Is that where we're going on the 14th?
Yes.
Yeah, it's I was aware of it because I knew that the Fellers guys were coming, so I was aware of. I had a little email chatter. We've had some issues. I know I told you these issues with the Athletic, but we've had some email issues where I've had email service for like one of the last 5 days, and all of a sudden today when I came in the office. My boss came down. He said, "Yeah, they emailed us the instructions for how to get past the email problems that we're having, but nobody got the email because we were having email problems." So, and everybody in my family just assumes it's because I'm technologically overmatched or something. I said, "No, I'm just telling you, it doesn't work." And sure enough, it doesn't. So
I know that's B-roll, by the way, but how gorgeous is Citi Field? I know it's no Shea Stadium, but like that's a cool, beautiful ballpark.
It is cool.
Yeah, I covered one series, Mets Marlins series there. It was kind of a thrill. I also covered one at Shea, which was a bigger thrill.
I've never been to Citi Field, so I'd love to get there sometime. But the ballparks to me they're cool because most of them are open air, they've got open views of the city in most cases. And, this year I got a chance to go to Pittsburgh for the first time. But I just think about all the great ballparks I've been to, and every one of them has a different feel, where hockey arenas are kind of the same once you're inside for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
But baseball stadiums, it's all different. The sight lines are totally different. The views are different.
100%. You know that every is 200 by 100. Like it's just
right.
in hockey and every dimension. I remember I covered a series in Pittsburgh once, and AJ Burnett absolutely got shelled, and he just went on this rant after the game about them playing in a Little League park. And I'm just like, and it's true. I mean, you look at like some fields like Philly, like Pittsburgh, these are small ballparks. What I've always wondered about Coors Field, which I'm going to next week, is like I've always wondered why they didn't turn it. Like the outfield is facing away from downtown, which if I'm correct,
the outfield actually it's the outfield that faces back toward downtown.
Oh, okay, all right, then I am wrong. So I did flip.
Kind of. I mean, I guess the right fielder would be looking back toward the buildings of downtown.
See, that's what I mean. Like I always like when you're swinging toward the fences and you see the back.
Right. Yeah. So where the hitter would be like most of the fans, it is kind of pointed backward and I don't know if it's because they were hoping, because it's not like you have a great view of the mountains when you look out that way.
No, you're going the wrong way. You're facing the airport.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's weird, but that neighborhood in Denver has really
huge
turned over, and it's a cool spot down around there.
Used to be not a place you'd want to be.
No, I know. We spent a couple nights down in that neighborhood early. The ballpark was there, but it hadn't quite turned over yet. And there were a couple places that were fun, but there were also, it was a little sketchy walking back to the hotel from there.
Who's that pitcher there? Winkler? Or
Winker's the hitter.
Oh, Winker. Okay, there you go. Hitter.
But he's the hitter. Cole Sands is
I saw
the pitcher.
that. But speaking of which, so I was listening to a good podcast today, Smartless. It's every now and then I like to listen to a good podcast as opposed to this. So Smartless is hosted by Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes, and it's hilarious. But I was listening to the Henry Winkler one. It's really good. But the one that I wanted to tell you about that I know you'll love is Steve Martin and Martin Short were on together. It is one of the funniest interviews you've ever seen.
I like those two guys.
Oh my God, they are just hilarious, and their chemistry and friendship is just. It's a good thing, like when you go on a long walk. It's good. It's a perfect hour.
Did you watch their show, that Only Murderers in the Building?
Yeah.
And I tried, and I don't know if I was in the wrong frame of mind.
You got to be in the right one.
Yeah, and it wasn't. I watched maybe 4 episodes, and I usually watch shows while I'm working, so I'm kind of half watching, and that one just never captured my attention, but I saw them promote it so many times that I feel like I got to go back and try it again, because I do think they're so incredibly talented.
Yeah. You know what, the character that I think he's brought out of retirement is Jiminy Glick. That is hilarious. Where he's the super fat, essentially interviewer.
Yeah.
That's just completely, it's just so exaggerated and hilarious. And, he's wearing a bodysuit and he's got like donuts next to him. He's interviewing somebody and just like showing that he has no care in the world about the person he's interviewing.
I watched Steve Martin's special where he was talking about his career path. I think it might have been on Apple TV. It was a 2-part series of his whole career. And some of his early stand-up stuff it was almost like it was too smart for the audience sometimes. And until people knew who he was, then the same stuff was funny.
Yeah. But
in the early days, he was struggling with the fact that the stuff he knew was funny, sometimes people just didn't get it.
Yeah.
But I'm always amazed by that kind of talent, musical talent, stand-up, live comedy kind of talent. And those two guys both have it.
Yeah. It's just always, I don't know. I love those guys. But this Smartless podcast, it's kind of my new big thing here. And it's just really good.
They might label this podcast Smartless.
Yeah, that's exactly. And that's the joke of them calling it Smartless, is that they're supposed to be smartless. But we'll see. All right, let's answer some Twitter questions, unless you got anything else you want to chat about.
No, I'm good.
All right, Michael Scott, which I don't know if it's the real Michael Scott from The Office.
Could be Michael Scott from Totino Grace Football.
Could be. Ask if Arch or is he like the head coach, or who's
No, he was a player.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it could be. All right. Are no trade clauses ever public, or certain teams selected more than others? Actually, Jeremy Rutherford did a great story in the second half of the season that if you Google it, you'll find it. Just Google Jeremy Rutherford no trade clauses. Has a whole breakdown of the number of no trades given out. The Wild actually were not at the top of the list. They were sort of near it, but as far as ever public, no. In fact, it was a big controversy with the whole Ottawa Vegas trade a couple of years ago with Dadonov, that it was a screwy situation where Vegas, somehow Ottawa didn't know that Dadonov was on the no trade. Then they tried to trade him there, and it was just a whole mess. And the biggest issue is that even no trade lists aren't even submitted to central registry. It's just something that teams know. And if you ever watch one of those, they do behind the scenes on YouTube every now and then, where they'll show you what a no trade call is like between the assistant GM or GM of one team and the assistant GM and GM of the other team that make a trade with central registry, where they call in Montreal. At the end of the call, all they do is ask is that team on the team's no trade list, and then the GM or assistant GM of the other team that made the trades just got to be honest and say, nope, he's free to be traded there. That's all it is. It's just like sort of the honor system.
Right.
And somehow,
and I remember when he was writing that, I remember we had a conversation either right after the story or right before it, where at that time there was talk about central registry becoming the spot where all of that was held just to protect teams from this. But was it Paul Fenton that forgot to get a no move list?
No, well, so it's sort of. So Chuck Fletcher had a rule that if you had a no trade, even though they're supposed to be redone by July 1, he had basically had a rule that I don't ask for your no trade unless I need it. So at the draft in what would it have been? Well, had to be his only draft he ever did. Well, he technically did two, but he was fired after the 2019 draft. But at his first one in 2018, so this is a month after he's hired, he's at the table, and he had a deal that potentially could have been done with either Spurgeon, Stahl, or it would have been Dubnyk at the time. So it had to be Doobie, I would think. And so he turns the assistant GM at the time and basically says to him, hey, can I get the no trade list for probably Dubnyk? And he's like, well, we don't have one. We never got one from him because Chuck Fletcher never asked. And Paul flipped out and the trade never happened. And then all of a sudden on July 1, he basically made all those players go get, submit their no trade list. So yeah, usually if you have a modified no trade list, what that really means is that every July 1, I think it can be negotiated when the actual date is, but it's usually July 1. Team goes and asks for the team's no trade list. And the other story that happened with the Wild that I know of is that Eric Stahl, remember it was a pandemic changed season. So at the end of September one year, when after the 2021 season essentially would have started, or 21-22. I can't remember exactly when it was. Whenever he was traded to Buffalo, Bill Guerin called and said, I need your no trade list. His agent, Rick Curran, sends it in. Buffalo wasn't on it. And all of a sudden, boom, traded to Buffalo. Here you go.
And I know that a lot of times guys play games with that about guessing who they think might be their trade partner.
Yep.
And I remember when that happened and it was like out of the blue. That was just not a team that you would even
goalies
thought
especially
about.
Can manipulate their modified no trades because, if you're Devin Dubnyk, you're not putting you don't have to put the Rangers on there because you're not getting traded to the Rangers because they have Shesterkin. You don't have to put the Islanders on there. So even if you don't want to be traded to a certain team, if that team's got a long-term number one, you're probably not putting them on there. And so now suddenly you turn your 15 team no trade into really like a 23 or 24. Right. So goalies are the tough ones that if you give modified no trades to, they can really manipulate it and make sure they're not traded. Trevor asks, do you think the Faber contract is going to be as bad as the Parisi and Suter contracts in the future? Big difference here is that Faber's 21, turning 22, where those guys were Group 3 UFAs signing 13-year deals. 5 more years than the Faber ones because, again, they put in the max contract after
5
those
more
deals.
years and 8 years later in their careers.
So we always knew that the Faber, the Parisi and Suter contracts were always going to end badly. In fact, I wrote that they're going to have to eventually deal with it, especially when they backdove, which led to the cap recapture, which led to Bill Guerin's motivation to buy them out as far as so he wouldn't have to worry about cap recapture, assuming they each retired early, which one did. Ryan obviously signed with St. Louis. No, we don't think that. Tweets by Nolan says there's only one forward spot opening before the 25-26 season, Johansson. Assuming Urov makes the team, what does this mean for UFA prospects like Height making the team? I understand we don't have much cap space as we thought, but even if we did, no spots. I mean, that's sort of been my sort of message here the last little while. To Anthony's points, he feels that you can always make rooms, whether it's Lauko being moved or some Gaudreau being moved, Hartman's no move, returns modified no trade. There's always ways, but that's my only issue is that they've just made it really difficult in terms of flexibility.
A little bit, but it's also guys in different spots.
Right.
And Johansson isn't a guy that right now you're penciling in saying he's our long-term solution in the top 6. And if Urov comes and if Urov is what we think Urov is going to be, you're talking about apples to oranges.
Yeah. Lundin 4S, what's next for extension talks after the Faber extensions? Right now, the next pressing thing will be Kaprizov next summer. He's not eligible to sign an extension until next July 1. Captain Awesome says, any updates on the arena remodeling? Basically, nothing has changed since the last time I talked. Obviously, the legislative session, really nothing got done in terms of that last year. They asked for a certain amount of money to essentially start the rendering process of all the things they want to do, not just at the arena, but around the arena. And then there'll be some, hopefully news in the next couple of weeks, in terms of the budget and all that thing. So really nothing has changed, but everything is sort of on hold. And again, interest rates are high now. The hope is also that interest rates come down. Somebody asked if the Bally Sports North news today, Anthony, with the Twins affects the Wild. Technically, the Wild, again, have a 1-year deal left on their deal. So, I mean, the Wild are on Bally Sports North next year. The big thing, though, is that one is actually not related to the other. The NHL and the NBA, I think the NBA has 10 teams on Bally's regionals. The NHL has 9 teams, the way that I understood it.
Yeah, there were more, but a couple gave the rights back.
Right.
And so it's a big step in the right direction. There's a lot of details that still have to be worked out with it, not the least of which is that they have to get the teams and the leagues on board with their plan coming out of bankruptcy, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes,
and
that's exactly right.
I'm not an expert on this. I just know that this is a step in the right direction. It's the first step out of maybe 4 or 5 that were needed to happen for there to be resolution. And,
right.
I for the sake of the fans, today was exciting. And hopefully there's more good news in the near future about what's going to happen moving forward. Because as I've said all along, the best case scenario for the teams in this market and for the fans in this market is to have the model that has always been a regional sports network, whether it lately Bally's, prior to that Fox, prior to that MSC, to have that in this market as the home for all these teams. It's good for the teams, it's good for the fans, and I hope that somehow, some way, we get back to that.
3 more quickies. Lucas Lawrence goes, any news on what's next for Goligoski? Is he officially retired, still trying to play? He's not officially retired yet. I got to think that's coming, and it's just a matter of when and how he's going to announce it. Is Carson Lambo still part of the future plans? I rarely hear his name mentioned amongst prospects. That's Sea Dog Nips. I mean, it's all up to him. I mean, he's got to continue to develop and play better than he has in Iowa. Right now, Damon Hunt, David Spacek, or Damon Hunt and David Spacek are sort of overtaking him on the depth chart. And, you've got Jack Peart there now. You got Ryan O'Rourke there. You got Kyle Masters. And then obviously Lambos. He's got to realize that he's got to get, kicking here if he wants to have a career. Final question, Sean Coastgrove asked, any word on Spurgeon's progress? Is he skating? As I've written all along, he's been skating 3-4 times a week since the end of the season. Everything continues to progress for him to be ready for the start of camp and come back next year. Also, Marcus Foligno is feeling great as well. The two big guys that we know of that were hurt at the end of last year are definitely doing much, much better. Anything else, Anthony?
That's all I got.
All right. We will do a podcast next week before I head out to Colorado. Between my sister-in-law, my brother, my nephews, my mom are all coming to town. And then I'm heading to Colorado for like a 3-game
They're coming to town
respite.
And you're leaving town?
No, that actually normally would be something. Yes, it has. That actually has. Yeah. What was that? I can't remember.
Your mom was coming to town.
And I was out of town.
And you left. Yes. Because then I remember, number one, she was staying with somebody else in your building.
No, down the street.
Was it down the street?
Yeah.
But she was staying somewhere else, because then you texted me and said, well, I'm leaving town for a couple days while she's here. Is there any chance you could help her out with Twins tickets for she and this other woman she's staying with? Yes, and you did. And we did.
Yes.
Of course we did.
Rita was her name. Yep. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of guys invite their mom to town for a visit and then go on vacation.
I wonder where the hell I was going.
I'm
Probably
sure
was like Breckenridge or something.
I think you were going to Mexico, if I remember right, but I
think you're right.
A while back.
Well, first of all, she wasn't just coming to town. I think she was here a month. I wasn't going to stay here a month. Is that crazy?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a month with my mom in town. Are you kidding?
I think you're right. I think I was going to Cabo.
I think you went to Mexico for a while.
Well, I mean, I still needed some of my vacation for my off season.
Right.
I wasn't going to take her to Cabo. It's hot.
Well, maybe next time I invite my mom over for dinner, I'll go out to eat somewhere else.
Yeah. I am going to the August 4th Twins game against the White Sox, which they've won 27 games this year, I think.
I think they're 20. I think I just looked at it today. I believe that they're 27-81, because I had looked at it and they were exactly a .250 winning percentage.
That's crazy.
1 out of 4.
So yeah. And I spent a pretty penny on StubHub like a month and a half ago. I wish I waited.
I bet it's a hot commodity to get a ticket against the White Sox.
But I also, I had to get the club level because I wanted air conditioning just in case it gets super hot for my mom. And so I should have probably waited, because I think now
you could probably get them for $1.
I think it'd be a lot, even though the Twins are actually they've been
Twins
good.
Are playing great baseball.
Yeah, but they're getting I was reading in the Strib today, they're getting 23,000 a game.
Yeah, and that's a little bit deceptive, because early in the season they had a lot of small crowds. Mm-hmm. Lately, they just had a homestand against Milwaukee and Philadelphia. And now I know Milwaukee's different, but they had the largest regular season crowd in the history of Target Field for one of the 2 Brewer games. Uh-huh. And then the Philadelphia series, they had great crowds for that series, and there were a lot more Philly fans. I didn't realize that there were that many Philadelphia fans in the Twin Cities, but even with that, it was good to see the buzz in the stadium again. And I don't think the style of baseball the Twins are playing is any small part of that. They're playing a much more entertaining brand of baseball. They're not striking out as much. The ball's in play. They're playing better defense. This is a little bit more of what Twins fans always remember was great about Twins baseball. It was just a team that made themselves tough to beat. And it was fun to see the atmosphere at the ballpark the Twins are right now holding one of the playoff spots in the American League. It's a exciting ball club with some exciting young talent.
Well, I'm looking forward to showing my nephews the ballpark. They're going to love it. I mean, not only are they great baseball players, but they are unbelievable fans. So
they should see wins if the White Sox are in town.
Yeah, that's what I hope. That's for sure. Well, all right, great podcast. August 14th is our next live show at Split Rock, 7 p.m. So please come on out there for that. Maybe we can have a little Portugal reunion if we're on our Portugal trip. Come on out for that because we haven't seen you in at that point a month. And then I go to Prague a couple days later for the NHL media tour there. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thanks for joining us in the Aquarius Home Services studio on location at Bally Sports North. Thanks to Aquarius Home Services, our longest sponsor on this podcast, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Royal Credit Union, Bosch Law Firm, Feller's Ranch, and of course, Twill in the Edina Galleria. Thanks, everybody.